the third media briefing, I think it is, of the State Capture Commission. We're going to have just a very short media briefing, I believe. The purpose of the media briefing will be explained by the chairperson of the commission. We will then, after that, have a question and answer session, and after that, it shall be the end of the media briefing. Without any further ado, I would like to hand over to the chairperson of the commission, the Honorable Deputy Chief Justice.
Thank you very much, Nati. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the media. Welcome to this media briefing. I particularly want to thank you for making sure that each time we invite you to these media briefings, you come. Thank you very much. We are going to use this media briefing to update the public, to update the nation on the work of the commission and the preparations, so that everybody knows what is happening and where we are. But before we do that, I am going to ask the Secretary of the Commission, Dr. De Vere, to deal with one item. But before actually he does so, you will see that the people that are sitting with me here are people mostly that you saw at the previous media briefing, but there will be two that were not there. Those are members of the core legal team of the commission who have been added to the team that you saw on the 7th of March when we had the other media briefing. They are Mr. Philip Mukwena, SC. There he is. He's an advocate at the Johannesburg Bar. And on my extreme left, it's Ms. Mashape Silo. She's a member of the Johannesburg Bar. They have both been added to the core legal team. I think I explained last time that we were going to have a legal team that would be with the commission from beginning to end, but that we would add other lawyers as we went along, depending on the work. So there would be other lawyers who will come and assist when there is a need, when their expertise is required, or when there is a lot of work at a particular time, and the core legal team requires to have more people, more lawyers. Then we'll bring them on board, and when they are done with whatever we might ask them to help us, then they'll go. But when we need them again, we invite them back. But the legal team that you saw on the 7th of March, plus the two members of the legal team I've just mentioned now, that is the core legal team of the commission. And as we go along, we might add, depending, but that for now is the legal team. I think, therefore, that everyone else that is here on the stage with me are people that are known to you already, particularly those who were at the last media briefing. So at this stage, I'm going to ask the Secretary of the Commission, Dr. De Vere, to say something to you about the logo of the Commission. We didn't have a logo when we had the last media briefing. We now have a logo. We have premises. So, Dr. De Vere.
Ladies and gentlemen, we thought that before the chairperson gives his address, you would want to know what this logo about and what it stands for. Now, very briefly, as you look at our logo, you'll see our national flag, which, as you know, is a symbol and representation of our country and its people. And you know what these colors mean. They reflect our demographics. They reflect all of us, including our aspirations. The circle elements that you see in the logo, they are basic symbol of wholeness and inclusion. As you know, our nation was founded on the principles of nation building and reconciliation. Given the nature of our commission and its terms of reference, the scales of justice are very important to us, and they represent the justice system and the weighing of evidence in dealing with any matters of justice. So that's really a brief description of our logo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. De Vier. Let's continue. I said just a while ago that we have premises, we have acquired premises for the commission. Part of the premises we will occupy is in this building, and we also have premises that we will occupy across the street in a building called Hillside House. That's where most of the staff and personnel will be. And we have a website already. We have a postal address, post box. We have obviously a physical address because we now have premises. We have a landline, a telephone line. So something is happening. But before I go on, I think that I need to deal with something that some of you may be waiting to ask me about. At the previous media briefing, those who were there will remember that I made a statement to the effect that we had identified investigators, and I indicated that within 10 days or within 20 days, I can't remember whether I said 10 or 20, but from around 20 March, I said that there should be a certain number of investigators who would have begun their job and gone out to the field to start with investigation. That did not happen, and the reason why it did not happen is related to the fact that the discussions which we needed to have with some government departments who have to deal with us in terms as a commission, the discussions we were supposed to have with them before investigators could go out into the field took much longer than we had anticipated. You will also recall that we had indicated that our plan was that the identity of our investigators would not be publicly known. Also allied to that was that because of the sensitivity of some of the features of the investigation of this commission, we wanted to make sure that whatever arrangements were made in terms of the investigation, we would have a certain level of confidentiality, because in our view, otherwise, this work of this commission might not be effective. So we needed to discuss with certain government departments in order to ensure that we could achieve that. That took much longer than we had anticipated, but in the end, we were able to reach an agreement, and we are able to move forward. And part of what delayed us, which is connected with confidentiality, was that the operating model or funding model for the commission required to ensure that this confidentiality that we are talking about would be built into the funding model, so that we would not be hampered in making sure that our investigations proceeded in a certain way with that level of confidentiality. As I say, that is part of what we were discussing with some government departments, and that took long. But about early last week or the week before last week, that was resolved, and we are now in a position to move forward. We have also, we had identified, I think we said already in our previous media briefing, quite a high number of investigators that we would need. Investigators with different skills and expertise. Those investigators, a number of them, have now been able to sign contracts with the commission so that they can start working. Others who have not yet signed contracts, I'm confident that in the next week or so, they will have also been able to sign their contracts and will be able to go out into the field and start with their part of the investigation. I want to say they are part of the investigation because just because there was a delay which affected the investigators doesn't mean that no work was being done in terms of investigation. The head of investigations, Mr. Nombembe, and the core team that he is working with have been working very hard to lay a foundation to ensure that when the investigators begin their investigation, a proper foundation has been laid so that the investigations can move smoothly. To this end, arrangements have been made and discussions have been held with people in various government departments and entities to make sure that we will get proper cooperation with regard to the work of the commission. And at this stage, all those with whom the commission has been in touch in terms of government departments are giving us cooperation. And once the investigators start with their work, that cooperation will be very beneficial to the commission. The legal team has also been working very hard. As you might have seen in the media, the record of the public protector relating to her investigations into state capture was handed over to the commission some time back. And soon thereafter, the legal team began to do the reading that's necessary because they needed to see whether the information that the public protector has was adequate. And if it was not adequate, they would see how it needed to be supplemented. They are working on that. Arrangements also were made. I was in touch with the Speaker of the National Assembly to facilitate the handing over of records from portfolio committees of the National Assembly which have had some inquiries into state capture, to have those records handed over to the Commission, I received full cooperation from the leadership of Parliament, and indeed, those records have been handed over to the Commission. The legal team and the investigators will look at all of those records and see what we can use and see where there might be a need to supplement that information. We are going to be obtaining records from other entities as well, including state-owned enterprises, in respect of whom there are allegations of state capture, and we will be seeking records and other documents from them. There have been meetings and discussions which all indicate that, at least in regard to some entities, there will be full cooperation. We haven't had discussions with all of them, but there will be full cooperation from those with whom we have had discussion, so that all those documents that we may need can then be made available to the Commission, and they can be studied, and where they need to be supplemented, they will be supplemented. The legal team has already started making arrangements for the interviewing of potential witnesses for the Commission. In this regard, they have already been in touch with lawyers who represent certain people who are potential witnesses before the Commission. They have received cooperation from the lawyers who represent those that they have contacted, and in due course, members of the legal team will begin to interview those potential witnesses. In fact, if all arrangements are made and dates can be found next week that suit all concerned, I think that the legal team would be making plans to try and see if by end of next week, some of those potential witnesses would not have been interviewed. So although there have been some challenges in terms of delays, work has been going on, a lot of planning has been going on, and we are now at a stage where the interviewing of potential witnesses will begin soon. I know that one of the questions that you will be wanting to ask me, and members of the public ask some of us when they meet us, is when are we going to have the hearings? So let me say this, that we appreciate the fact that the public has a huge interest in this commission and its work. And it is right that it should be so, because the matter that we are investigating is a public interest matter. We appreciate that the public would like the hearings to start as soon as possible, and we will be doing everything we can that we have the hearings as soon as possible. At this stage, we are planning to have the first hearings in August. We have identified certain witnesses whose evidence can be heard in August. So we are planning that the first hearings would be in August. There might be an adjournment after some of those witnesses, before there are other witnesses that would come. But at this stage, we are looking at August as the month when we will have the first hearings. So in the meantime, we will be working flat out to make sure that this investigation doesn't take 1 day longer than it should. But in doing so, we are mindful of the fact that we must do a proper job. We must do a thorough job. So we will be trying to make sure that we strike a fair balance between not delaying too much, but at the same time, making sure that we do a proper job. I think maybe the head of the legal team might wish to say 1 or 2 things, and the head of investigations might also wish to say 1 or 2 things, and the secretary of the commission might wish to say 1 or 2 things as well. But before they do so, I indicated earlier on that we have got premises, we have got staff that have been appointed, personnel that will be working, and some of them will already be using the premises that we have acquired. And later on, once the full space is available to us, then more staff will be there. Mr. Pretorius, do you want to say a thing or two?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think when the Deputy Chief Justice says I might, I think he means I shall. The legal team has indeed been working very hard over the last few months. Some of the scope of its work obviously includes a careful planning of the content and sequence of evidence to be given. It must make sense, not only to lawyers, but to the persons most interested in the proceedings and outcome of this commission, that is the South African public. We have looked at and are continuing to look at all the sources of information that already exists, subjecting that to an analysis and really putting it into the plan that we're developing to give evidence. It involves robust debate, but hopefully the product will be deserving of the mandate that has been given to us. Notices have been prepared calling for submissions and evidence from the general public, and those notices will be published in the very near future. The public will be invited to give evidence by way of sworn statement, or where that is not possible, they will be given assistance by the Secretariat of the Commission so that proper evidence can be taken. In confidence, if necessary, provision will also be made for that. There have been various legal issues that have been addressed by the legal team in attempting to protect the integrity of the Commission, its regulations, its terms of reference. There have been various potential challenges, various queries raised, and these have taken some attention and time on the part of the legal team to assist the Commission to deal with these. We're at the moment preparing rules for the conduct of the Commission's proceedings. We are obliged by law to remain within our terms of reference. Those terms of reference will require careful interpretation and application, and may become the subject of debate before the Commission in the course of its proceedings. And the Commission must obviously operate in a way which is fair. In order to facilitate this, but also to keep the proceedings of the Commission within reasonable time limits, careful rules have to be carefully prepared in order to manage the proceedings of the Commission. We've also prepared rules and notices for interaction with the media, accreditation for the media, and the manner in which and the extent to which the media will provide coverage for the proceedings of the Commission. That's more or less what we have been doing, which is the public part of our work.
I just want to emphasize the point that we will issue, I think by end of next week, a notice that will be published in the Government Gazette to invite the public, those who might have information or evidence relating to our terms of reference, that is relating to allegations of state capture, allegations of corruption and fraud in the public sector, including the organs of state. So that will be sent out next week. At this stage, I would like I would like the head of investigations to say something or two as well, if he would like to say something.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Perhaps to just underscore some of the messages that you've shared here, I also want to emphasize the importance of the thoroughness of planning in order to make sure that as we proceed with the work, the fundamental principle of expedition is accomplished, because this is a highly complicated project, and therefore planning is of paramount importance for us to be able to execute it with the expedition that it actually demands. Particularly the reference we've made, Mr. Chairman, to the public interest that this project is associated with. And may I also touch on the issue of the investigators as well, that the identification of the best that South Africa could provide in terms of talent is what we have had to pay attention to in order to make sure that, once again, the thoroughness with which the work is done, the high quality with which the work is done, is something that we don't even dare to compromise. So I thought those are the issues that are also worthy of highlighting. And the synergy between the investigative team and the legal team, as Paul has identified, is very critical to make sure that the sequencing, the scheduling, and the periodic execution of these hearings is something that is carefully and synchronized logically and systematically. So I think those are the things that we are mindful of in doing this. Let me just touch also on the importance of the engagements that we've held with the critical organs of state, especially those that have got important mandates of doing a lot of surveillance work on areas of the flow of funds and areas that relate to investigation of matters that this commission will be seized with. It was quite satisfactory for us, being part of those discussions, to hear the level of commitment and support that those state organs have committed to provide for this commission. And it's therefore important for us that in scheduling our own work, we make sure that issues of overlaps, duplication of effort, and omitting critical pieces of evidence is something that we avoid. Hence, this kind of collaboration with these state organs is something that we've had to look into in preparing for this assignment. Mr. Chairman, you've spoken quite extensively and elaborately on the matter of the confidentiality and manner with which this investigation is going to be done. In an environment where there's little room for infiltration, interference, and disruption. And these are the issues that in having to deal with our operating model, we have had to deal with. And I must say, this does not mean that we actually want to hide anything, but it's important in the course of investigation that you respect the thoroughness of the process so that before it's opened up in the public hearings, all the checks and balances have been done. All the people that have got the right to be heard have been heard. before any form of interference or disruption or infiltration or sabotage of the process, ever sets in. And that's why the environment under which or in which this work will be carried out is important to be insulated in that respect. And I do think that that was, in our view, time well spent to actually cross all the T's and dot all the I's to make sure that we don't stumble into problems in the middle of a very important scrutiny and find ourselves compromised in the way in which we do our work. Also on the parallel investigations that have been made, I think it's common knowledge in South Africa that a lot of work is and has been done with regard to matters of state capture. And the trick with the investigative role is to make sure that we build on what has been done already so that we optimize the use of the state resources in making sure that we don't duplicate things unnecessarily or omit things that we should not be omitting in our way of work. So engagements and collaboration and synchronizing with everybody, because this is not a fresh assignment. This is an assignment I'm sure everyone is saying, but what about the work that's done by the law enforcement agencies? What about the work that's done by the state-owned entities? What about the work that's done by government departments? These are all the matters that in our planning and execution we'll have to do with a great deal of precision. And I do want, DCJ, in addition to just your affirmation, to just reassure the South African public that this is what we are committed to and gearing ourselves to be able to execute with that level of precision. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nombembe. Dr. Devies, Secretary of the Commission, do you have anything you would like to say?
Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity. Just very briefly, I won't repeat what the chairperson and my two colleagues have mentioned. Just to emphasize that for our commission to be successful in realizing its mandate in terms of reference, we rely a lot on information. Today we can say that we have a website. The address of our website is www.sastatecapture.org.za. We now have premises at number 16 and number 17 Empire Road. Number 16 Empire Road is where the public hearings will be, as the chairman indicated. Number 17 Hillside House is where shortly after the public notice has been issued in a time period indicated by the chairperson, at number 17 Empire Road, Hillside House, we will be having a reception desk ready to receive information. And of course, we'll have a telephone number. We'll be running a call center. Our number is 010-214-0651. So well, I will repeat it. The chairperson says I will repeat it. Our website address is www.sastatecapture.org.za. Our addresses is number 16 Empire Road, which is where we are, where the public hearings will be. We will be receiving submissions in a week's time after the public notice has been issued at number 17 Empire Road, which is Hillside House, where we'll be running a reception desk to welcome the information provided. And our telephone number, which will go straight to our call center, will be 010-214-0651. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Devier. Another question that I think you are likely to ask me is one that relates to the 180 days within which the Commission is required to complete its work. I did mention at the media briefing that we had on the 7th of March that I had raised this issue with the President when I had the opportunity to meet with him to brief him on the Commission in February. We have recently raised it with him, and the Presidency is looking into the issue, and I have no doubt that in due course an announcement will be made with regard to what is to happen with regard to the 180 days. The one option, as I believe I may have indicated at the last media briefing, the one option is that it is possible that a decision might be taken that the court be approached, the High Court, and asked to vary that time frame so that it's a different time frame, or to set it aside and allow a different time frame that will enable the Commission to continue beyond 180 days with its work, because as I said at the last media briefing, there is simply no way in which this massive work of this Commission could be done within 180 days, even with the fact that there are some agencies which have been having inquiries on state capture or investigating. Even with that, there is no way in which 180 days would be enough for us to set up the Commission, investigate, have hearings, have arguments, prepare the report, and submit the report to the President. So I'm sure that the media will get to know in due course what decision will have been taken about that. Lastly, I just want to say that we acknowledge the support that the public has for this Commission. Very often when I am at functions or when I am at a mall, members of the public come up and say and tell me how much they support this Commission and how much they wish this Commission well in its job. So we acknowledge all of that. We acknowledge the support. We are grateful to all the people of South Africa for the support that they are giving the Commission. At this stage, I will hand over to the Program Director, Nati, who will deal with the question of questions.
Thank you, Chair. There we are, colleagues. We are now going to take questions from you, colleagues. I would like you to direct your questions to the Chairperson. He will then use his discretion on whether to respond himself or to allow the panel members here present to respond. But I just thought perhaps before we do that, let me quickly mention that the website that was mentioned does allow the members of the public also to report there. So those members who are outside Gauteng must also take note that this Empire Road is in Parktown in Johannesburg, Gauteng. We will take one question from one person, or maybe more than one, but we will then respond to that question to allow the Chairperson to reflect on the question and then respond. If there are any questions, may I get the indications? Yes, sir. I will take just the first three, 1, 2, 3, right in front of me. You will introduce yourself and the media house that you represent, and then you will deal with your questions.
Good afternoon.
Do speak, I think.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Lubabalo Mashikwana from CNBC Africa. I just have a point of clarity. I just want to know if has there been communication sent to the witnesses that have been identified for the starting of the hearings in August?
The answer is that some of the witnesses that have been identified for giving evidence in August, their lawyers have been contacted. Not all of them as yet, but that is work in progress in terms of trying to get in touch with all of them. But as I've indicated, those that have been contacted, their lawyers are giving full cooperation.
Gaupalelo Palaitile from Jacaranda FM News. I just want to know, are you at liberty to tell us which government departments you have engaged so far?
Well, we have been in touch with the Department of Justice. We have been in touch with Treasury. We have been in touch, I think, also with public enterprises. Yeah.
Erin Bates here from ENCA. Chairperson, Deputy Chief Justice, if you could please just detail the information you got from the Office of the Public Protector. Are you confident about the integrity of that information? And if so, why or why not? And then in terms of the information you've received, I understand you have information from Parliament in terms of the ESCOM inquiry. Do you have any records with your team currently from any other committees in Parliament, and if so, which ones?
Thank you. Well, the information or the record from the Public Protector is still being studied by the legal team. And once they have finished studying it, then they will have a clear view in terms of what one can make of it. And as I indicated, when we receive records from other agencies or other entities that have done some investigation, the first thing is to look at the record, read it, and see how adequate it is, and obviously see also whether there are any issues of integrity surrounding it. So that record is being looked at. The records from Parliament, my understanding is that we've got all of the records that they have, but those records too are yet to be read. We got those, I think, last week. So for all the committees in the National Assembly that have had some inquiry relating to state capture. Thank you.
Thank you. My brother, you were overtaken, so I'll start with you and the lady next to you. And you, Kanita, stop it. Let's follow that order, please.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Nkululo Kungana from Bloomberg News. Chair, just on the 180 days, now that you've established that it's a wholly inadequate, time period to complete your work, have you tried to figure out how much time do you actually need?
Look, we do have an assessment that we have made. We think that we should be able to finish in about 18 months, but it could go into 2 years. But that's an assessment that we have made based on what we know now. As the investigations continue and we uncover certain things, that assessment may well change. But as of now, that's the assessment that we have made.
Afternoon, Genevieve Quintal from the Business Day. The hearings in August, can you maybe just give us an indication of what aspects of the inquiry you will be starting with? And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure in early stages it was indicated that it might be the issue relating to the appointment of cabinet ministers. Can you give us some indication based on the terms of reference of what aspect you will be starting with in August? Thank you.
No, I can't give that to you at this stage. There will be a time when we would maybe indicate to you the nature of the evidence that will be led much closer to the hearing, but not at this stage.
Justice Zondo, it's Conita Hunter from Eyewitness News. I just wanted to have two questions that are quite similar to my colleagues. The first thing is, you haven't broken down to us how you would be tackling some of the issues. Will it be thematic, where it will be themes or people of interest? You know, how will you break down your investigation? Because I can understand that it would be a mammoth task to do. The second thing around the investigators and the confidentiality of the process, are you not perhaps, you know, giving a luxury to the people that would be implicated by this inquiry? Why the extent and why the push to have things hush until there's a time where it's public hearings? What is the rationale? I understand from Mr. Nombembe as to, you know, he doesn't want to jeopardize things, but you know, what is the real motivation? Why protect people that may be implicated in state capture? And the third and last question that I have, Justice Zondo, is with regards to it being a 2-year process, is there no way that you were trying to expedite it? Why would it take so long? And are you going to do it in phases, you know, reports after phases? Are you looking at just a big report at the end of the inquiry? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, with regard to breaking down the investigation, certainly what we have in mind is that we will have what in our own discussion so far I've been calling fissures of the investigation. So we will have, as you all know, there are certain entities in respect of whom there are allegations of state capture. We would have a certain team of investigators focusing on a particular entity. And that team would be, of investigators would be, as I have indicated, a multidisciplinary team. But included in the team would be a lawyer or two who would help guide those investigators where there are legal issues. So for the various entities, there would be a special team that's focusing on that entity. And of course, as we go along, it may well be that at a certain stage, we then decide, once more evidence has come up, we then decide to deal with the evidence not as per particular entity, but as in accordance with certain principles or certain common features. So that's how we intend dealing with that. The second question that you asked, I must confess, I didn't understand. You say you think we are protecting the people who may be implicated in state capture. Let me just say this, because I think you were asking that with reference to our saying that our investigation needs a certain level of confidentiality in relation to certain features. That's not to protect them. Actually, it's meant to protect the investigation itself. It's meant to benefit the investigation because, one, we don't want them or other people who might want to access parts of the investigation prematurely and without authorization to do that. So it's meant to help us, not them. So we are looking at making our investigation as effective as possible. Obviously, there would be a time later, at the hearings, when they would know what evidence was collected against them. The third question related to the 18 months, which is 1.5 years to 2 years, we simply have to make a realistic assessment. And based on what we know now, this is the assessment that we are making. It may well be that when the investigations go on, we find that actually there needs to be more time than that. But at this stage, that's our assessment. If we are lucky and during the investigations we find that actually it will take shorter, obviously we will make sure it takes shorter if that's what appears. But we are not going to to say it's going to take 12 months when we know that based on what we know now, there's no way it can take 12 months. We'll give you a true assessment as we see it.
Thank you. May I also take questions from this side? To my lady, anyone on this side? You'll have your second round. You'll want a second round. Okay, we start here and we come to you.
Thank you. Ntakwana Ngatani, SABC News. Deputy Chief Justice, on the issue of, I suppose, infiltration or interference, you say that you want this process to be insulated from that. But there are allegations that there are some people who are already approaching the Commission to try and strike some amnesty deals. Is that a fact? And the second question is on the issue of gender. I think when I look at that table already, is it represented somewhere else, the balance?
Well, let me answer your questions. I like the last one very much. I am not aware of anyone who has approached the Commission to strike a deal. The head of the legal team says we can't do it anyway. so I'm not aware of anybody who has done that. With regard to gender, well, I was going to mention this. I should have mentioned it earlier on. There are 6 members of the core legal team, as announced today, and 3 of them are men and 3 of them are women. You see only one woman here, but another one is sitting there. Advocate Tandi Norman, she is there, she's part of the legal team. And another one, Advocate Leah Tabashe, who was here last time, was not able to make it today. And I can also say this, that among the members of the legal team who are not part of the core legal team, there are a number of women. So it's not looking bad. Thank you.
Deputy Chief Justice Aaron Bates again from ENCA. Just firstly on the terms of the Commission and Section 8, which has undergone an amendment since President Cyril Ramaphosa came in layperson's terms, if you could just simplify that for us as the public to understand what has changed and what it means for the evidence before the inquiry. And my second question is, in terms of information you gather, is it a passive process where you only expect people to phone you, come to your offices and visit your website, or will you be going out to known whistleblowers at different organizations, companies and the like that have spoken out on this issue of state capture?
I will answer the last one, and I'll ask the head of the legal team, who has been very involved with regard to the amendments of the regulations, to deal with the first. No, not at all. We are not going to sit back and be passive and wait for people to come out. We will go out there. You would have heard when I spoke earlier on that I talked about the investigators going out into the field. I used the same language on the 7th of March. The investigators will be going out into the field, gathering evidence and meeting people and gathering information. It's going to be a very, very active investigation. Thank you. Mr. Pretorius will help you with regard to Regulation 8.
Yes, I'll try and be straightforward and accessible against our nature. The first point is that Regulation 8.2 was the subject of a challenge or query. It provided, on the face of it, that anybody who gave evidence before the Commission would in effect, to put it colloquially, receive an indemnity, and that evidence could not be used in any future proceedings. The complaint was that exactly that by coming to give evidence before the Commission, that evidence could never be used again. There are two aspects that arose from that. The one was that, well, what if Mr. A gave evidence against Mrs. B? Could the evidence be used against Mrs. B? The regulation now makes it clear that that can happen. A person who gives evidence cannot have that evidence used against him, but any evidence derived from that evidence can be used against him. So the effect of the the effect of the regulation in sealing off the future use of evidence given by any particular witness has been reduced considerably, so that in effect it can be used, but subject only to the limitation that certain aspects of direct evidence can't be.
Kgaupalelo again from Jacaranda FM. I just wanted to find out, in terms of the whistleblowers, what measures are there to protect them if they want to, obviously they want to remain anonymous and so on, will they be known and so on?
Mr. Pretorius will answer that.
The regulations and the terms of reference empower the Commission to respect the confidentiality of witnesses where such is warranted. That remains in the discretion of the chairperson. So if the chairperson decides that for whatever reason there must be a hearing in camera, the chairperson will consider the relevant facts and make a decision and directions in that regard, subject of course to the duty to act fairly and to allow implicated persons to answer any allegations against them. Insofar as the receipt of evidence and the giving of evidence is concerned, the notices and the procedures that will be applied by the investigators and the Secretariat Office will provide for protection for witnesses who wish to give evidence under a veil of confidence. Arrangements will be made to do so.
May I see by show of hands if there are any further questions? I see there are. There is one. That will be our last question. If that is the case, may I hand over to you, sir?
Lubabala Mashukana again from CNBC Africa. I just saw something on Twitter that I'm going to read to you. It's for Mr. Nombembe that I want him to respond to. It's written, Terence Nombembe will be called as a person of interest about his dubious salary rise by Zuma, payback of more than 5 years, farewell party paid by Ace Magashule and advice he gave Free State on Estina to hide Gupta loot, but he's lead investigator.
I did not hear exactly what that Twitter says, but it's something that nobody, or at least I'm not aware. I'm not aware of. What's the allegation in the tweet?
The allegation on the tweet is saying Terence Nombembe will be called as a person of interest about his dubious salary rise by Zuma, back pay of more than 5 years, farewell party paid by Ace Magashule, and advice he gave Free State on Estina farm to hide Gupta loot.
I think that you probably don't know much about that allegation yourself. It's something that you have just seen, and I don't think that when something just comes to you like that without having had a chance to interrogate it, you could raise it publicly. I mean, at least if you know that somebody is talking about something that has or is deserving even of an answer, you know, it would have been better. I mean, it's something that somebody has just sent. It could be a completely, you know, unsubstantiated thing. Yeah, okay. No, unless Mr. Nombembe wants to say anything, I don't think that we should bother about that.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Chair.
Okay.
Are there any questions? I think in the absence of any further questions, we have given firstly the telephone number that people can call to make their submissions. There's a website, and they can also report whatever they want to report on the website that is given. I now hand over to the chairperson to close this media briefing for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Nati. Thank you very much once again for coming to this media briefing. Thank you for your questions of clarification. We appreciate them. We hope that we have clarified things, and that at least now it's much more clearer where our preparations are. I thank also the team of the Commission for making all the arrangements for this to happen. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues.